The scream cuts through the October rain like a blade wrapped in ice. A child's voice, small, terrified, breaking, pierces the downtown Los Angeles night. The streets are empty. The warehouses loom like tombs. And in the center of it all, a girl in a pink nightgown 3 sizes too big stumbles barefoot across wet asphalt, her lips turning purple, her breath coming in gasps that sound like drowning. She cannot be more than 4 years old. Aria Voss does not think. She moves. The plastic bag of leftover meal trays from Sunset Valley Care Home falls from her hands and scatters across the cracked sidewalk. The food she was going to eat for the next 3 days, the only food she could afford on what they pay her for double shifts, hits the ground. It does not matter. Nothing matters except the child. Aria runs. She sprints across 4 lanes of traffic at 11:27 at night, her body thin as a rail beneath blood-stained scrubs that have not been washed in a week, her calloused feet slapping against the wet concrete. Car horns scream. A delivery truck swerves. A cyclist shouts. The world explodes into noise and fury, and she does not hear any of it. She hears only the child. She scoops Emma into her arms and feels how the girl's ribs press against paper-thin skin, how the fever radiates from her small body like a furnace burning down, how her limbs shake and shake and shake. The child is burning alive from the inside. "Papa," Emma whimpers. "Papa, I am cold." Aria wraps her own threadbare jacket around the girl's shoulders, the jacket she bought 4 years ago at a Goodwill for $3.47, the only thing standing between her and December. She does not think about the October wind cutting through her scrubs like a blade. She does not think about her own body shaking now, her breath visible in white clouds, her fingers turning numb. She thinks only of this child. This small, burning, terrified child who does not belong on these streets at midnight. She does not see the 3 black SUVs idling at the intersection 50 feet away. She does not notice the dark-tinted windows. She does not notice the men inside in tailored suits that cost more than everything she owned combined. She does not notice the man in the center vehicle, the one with his knuckles white on the armrest, the one whose jaw is clenched so tight it looks like it might shatter. Inside the vehicle, Aleandro Caruso is 42 years old. He is 6'3". His hair is black at the roots and silver at the temples, swept back from a face that looks carved from stone. A scar runs from his left eye to his cheekbone, a permanent reminder of the night his father's fist stopped, because his father stopped breathing. He wears a charcoal suit tailored on Savile Row and a white shirt open at the collar. A platinum Patek Philippe watch catches the streetlight on his wrist. His eyes are the color of storm clouds, and right now they are fixed on the 12 security monitors mounted in the custom interior of the SUV. Monitor 7 shows his daughter's bedroom in his penthouse 3 miles north. The bed is empty. The window is open. The pink nightgown is missing. Monitor 3 shows a live street feed from the camera he installed 3 months ago on the corner of 7th and Alameda. He sees his daughter. He sees the woman in blood-stained scrubs holding Emma like she is made of glass. He sees the purple bruises on the woman's throat, bruises shaped exactly like fingerprints, like a man's hands had closed around her skin and held her there while she gasped for air that would not come. The silence in the SUV is absolute. Sergio sits in the driver's seat. He is 28, built like a boxer, with a scar on his neck that tells the story of a knife fight in Boyle Heights when he was 19. He waits. Franco sits in the passenger seat. He is 34, with dark eyes that miss nothing and a tattoo of a wolf on his forearm. His hand rests on his weapon. He waits. They have worked for Aleandro Caruso for 9 years and 6 months respectively. They know better than to speak. They know that when Aleandro goes quiet like this, the world is about to end for someone. His voice comes out barely above a whisper, deep and solid like an oath spoken to God himself. Get her. Sergio's hands are already moving toward the ignition. Franco is already reaching for his phone. Get them both. Aleandro's eyes do not leave monitor 3. Now. But what Aria Voss did not know, what she could never have known in this moment as she held the fever-hot child and looked around the empty streets for shelter, for help, for anywhere to take this girl before the cold finished. What the fever had started was that the sick child she had just saved belonged to the most dangerous man in Los Angeles. And he had been watching her on hidden cameras for the last 90 seconds. Before we continue, drop a like if this story is hitting you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Now let us go back to the beginning, to 18 hours earlier, to understand how a woman with $78 to her name and handprint bruises on her throat would end up holding the one thing Aleandro Caruso would kill or die for. 18 hours earlier. The parking lot of Sunset Valley Care Home is dark and empty except for 3 cars. The night shift is always like this: skeleton crew, minimal supervision, and residents who have been forgotten by everyone who ever loved them. Aria Voss has worked here for 4 years, 2 of those years pulling double shifts. She is 27 years old but looks 40. Her hair is dark brown, pulled back so tight it makes her temples ache. Her eyes are a pale blue, but they are not pale anymore, they are hollow. Her body is thin, not the thin of fashion or genetics, but the thin of a woman who eats once a day if she eats at all. She wears the same 2 pairs of scrubs on rotation because that is all she owns. 1 pair is light green. 1 pair is dark blue. Both are stained with bodily fluids that no amount of washing will ever completely remove. The bruises on her throat are shaped like fingerprints. They are 3 days old. They are turning from purple to yellow-brown. She wears a scarf to cover them, even though it is October, and a scarf draws questions, and questions cost her the tips she cannot afford to lose. Her shift ends at 11:15 at night. It should have ended at 11 o'clock. But Mr. Patterson in room 247 had a fall, and the day shift nurse, Angela, who is always in a hurry, never documented the incident properly, so Aria had to fill out the report, and the report took 15 minutes, and now she is late leaving, and she has $78 in her pocket that needs to last until next Friday. And every minute she is here is a minute she is not working the side gig she does from 11:30 to 1:38 at night, which is the only reason she has $78 instead of $12. She pushes through the employee exit into the October cold. The wind hits her face like a slap. The parking lot is poorly lit. Sodium vapor lights flicker in that dying way they do. Her car is a 2008 Honda Civic with 187,000 miles on it and a check engine light that has been on for so long she has stopped looking at it. She bought this car 5 years ago for $4,000 that she saved penny by penny by penny. It is the most expensive thing she owns. She reaches for her keys. Hands grab her from behind. The first one pins her arms. The second one spins her around. She sees his face in the sodium light. Douglas Hale is 43 years old, with a construction worker's build and a construction worker's tan, with a face that might have been handsome if it was not twisted with rage. He works as a foreman at Consolidated Building Systems. He makes $67,000 a year. He has a house in Pasadena. He has a new truck. He has everything except the one thing he wants, which is her, and his inability to accept her refusal has turned into something dark and permanent and terrifying. Why are you not answering your phone? His breath smells like beer and cigarettes. I have been calling you all day. Douglas, I told you. I told you we are done. Leave me alone. We are done when I say we are done. His hand closes around her throat and pulls her against his body. She cannot scream. She cannot breathe. She can only feel the pressure and the absolute certainty that this is how it ends, in a parking lot, under dead lights, with no one coming. You think you can embarrass me? You think you can tell me no? A car door opens. Footsteps approach. Rapid. Controlled. Heavy. Douglas releases her and steps back, and Aria gasps for air like a drowning person surfacing, her throat burning, her vision swimming. Douglas has the kind of face that women call charming, the kind that makes people believe him when he lies. He straightens his work shirt and speaks in a voice that sounds almost reasonable. Just checking on you, babe. Making sure you got home safe from your shift. Aria does not speak. She slides into her car and locks the doors, her hand shaking so badly she can barely get the key into the ignition. Douglas walks away, whistling, as if this was a normal interaction, as if he did not just try to crush her windpipe with his bare hands. Her phone shows for missed calls. 12 text messages. All from Douglas. She drives to the all-night diner on Hollywood Boulevard where she works the register from 11:30 to 1:11 a.m. She works this shift for $9.47 an hour plus tips. On a good night she makes $12 in tips. On a bad night she makes $2. Tonight will be a bad night. She knows this already. She can feel it in her bones. The wind howls. Rain begins to fall. She counts her money in the car before she goes inside. $23 cash. $45.72 in her checking account. $30 in a drawer at her apartment that she has not touched because it is emergency money and emergencies have not come yet, but they are always coming. She does the math in her head. Rent is $1,100 and it is due in 6 days. She has earned $412 so far this month. She needs $688 more. One more double shift would give her $76. Another shift would give her another $76. She is always $200 short. She is always drowning. She is always sinking, and the water keeps rising, and there is no one on shore throwing her a rope. At 12:02, a police officer comes in for coffee. Aria recognizes him. His name is Officer Ramirez and he works patrol downtown. She served him coffee 6 months ago when he came in with Douglas Hale, and she realized in that moment that Douglas had friends on the police force. That realization had felt like the water rising over her head. Officer Ramirez does not look at her. He sits in a booth and opens his laptop. He orders coffee. He does not tip. At 1:15 in the morning, Aria clocks out with $8 in tips. She drives home to her apartment, a studio on Figueroa Street where the landlord does not ask questions and the neighbors do not report anything because they are all terrified or broken or both. She lies in bed without eating and without sleeping, listening to the October wind rattle the windows, feeling the bruises on her throat throb with her heartbeat. She does not know that in 6 hours, everything will change. She does not know that somewhere 3 miles away, in a penthouse in downtown Los Angeles, a man is watching her apartment building on a security monitor. She does not know that his daughter is becoming very sick. She does not know that the fever will break through the night like a fever breaks, and the child will rise from her bed half asleep and half delirious, and she will wander to the open window, searching for something to cool her burning skin. She does not know that in 18 hours, she will be holding that child in the cold and rain, and that moment will divide her life into before and after. But the storm is building. The wind is rising. And everything that was about to happen was already in motion, already written in the cold October sky. The storm will pass, and you are far stronger than you think. The October wind rattled the window pane of the studio apartment on Figueroa Street, and Aria Voss lay on a mattress without sheets, counting bills on her chest in the half-light of dawn. $78. Crumpled ones and fives and a $10 bill that had been folded so many times it tore down the middle. This was everything. After sending the money for her grandmother's medication in Ohio, $47 she did not have, but her grandmother needed to breathe, after paying the rent on this place where the landlord did not ask questions because he was running from something too. After the electric bill and the bus pass and the can of soup she bought yesterday, there was $78 left in the world that belonged to her. She sat up slowly. Her ribs ached where Douglas had shoved her 3 days ago. Her throat, the skin around her throat still showed the shape of his fingers, 5 purple moons on the left side, bruises the color of old plums. She touched them and flinched. The restraining order sat on the floor beside her bed, folded into thirds. Officer Ramirez had laughed when she showed it to him. Not a mean laugh. Just the laugh of a man who did not believe her, who had worked construction with Douglas Hale 15 years ago, who had said, "Come on, Aria. Douglas is a good guy. You probably provoked him." She did not eat breakfast. The crackers in the cupboard, stale and tasting like cardboard and salt, she saved those for when she was truly desperate. Instead she drank water from the tap and got dressed in her work clothes. The scrubs had a name tag that said Rebecca. Her own name tag had ripped 2 weeks ago when Douglas grabbed her arm in the parking lot outside the care home, and she could not afford to order a new one, so she wore Rebecca's and no one asked questions. At 6:51 in the morning, she locked her apartment door and walked to the bus stop. The Sunset Valley Care Home sat on a corner lot surrounded by a fence that had been white once but was now the color of old teeth. Aria clocked in at 6:59 a.m. Her supervisor Monica looked at her with eyes that had stopped trying to hide pity a long time ago. Monica was 62 and had worked at Sunset Valley for 30 years, and she had seen 100 women like Aria walk through that door, and she had seen what happened to most of them. "You okay?" Monica asked, and her voice was like a question that already knew the answer. "I'm fine," Aria said, which was what she always said. The morning shift started with Mrs. Chen. She was 91 years old and had forgotten her daughter's name but had not forgotten kindness. When Aria came into her room with a clean nightgown and warm water in a basin, Mrs. Chen reached out and held her hand. "You are an angel," Mrs. Chen said. "You are my angel in this dark place." Aria helped her bathe, the warm water running over Mrs. Chen's papery skin, and Mrs. Chen hummed a song in Cantonese that Aria did not understand but understood anyway. This was love. This was what love sounded like in a room that smelled like antiseptic and the ghost of boiled vegetables. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and Aria's feet began to hurt in her shoes, which had a hole near the big toe and let the cold in. At 8:02 a.m., Mr. Patterson in room 204 did not touch his breakfast tray. Eggs and toast and a bowl of oatmeal that steamed and looked warm and real. Aria was changing his sheets when he said, "Take it." "I am not hungry." "You need to eat," she said gently. "I need to leave," he said, and he meant something different, something bigger, and she understood that too. She took the toast. Mr. Patterson smiled, which was rare, and that small smile cost him something she could not name. During her 8-minute break, Aria sat in the supply closet on a box of adult diapers and ate the toast standing up, not tasting it, just chewing and swallowing mechanically while the smell of bleach filled her lungs. $78. 5 days until the rent was due. Monica knocked on the closet door at 8:38 and said, "Come on. Mrs. Rodriguez needs you." Mrs. Rodriguez had Alzheimer's and most days could not remember her own name, but she called Aria daughter, and every time she said it, something in Aria's chest broke a little more. Aria bathed her with the same warm water and gentleness she used for Mrs. Chen, and Mrs. Rodriguez held her face between wet hands and said, "You look so much like your mother. You have her eyes." Aria's mother had left when she was 6 months old. She did not have a photograph. She did not have memories. She had only this, a 93-year-old woman with no mind left telling her she had her mother's eyes. At 3 p.m., between the morning shift and the evening shift, Aria walked 3 blocks to the grocery store on Vermont. The October sun was weak and pale, and the wind pushed debris across the sidewalk. She needed milk. She needed bread. She needed the impossible. But as she approached the store, she saw it. The silver pickup truck idling across the street, parked illegally in a no-parking zone, the engine running, exhaust rising like smoke into the cold air. Douglas Hale sat in the driver's seat. Aria's hands began to shake. Her right hand, which had been steady all morning while she bathed Mrs. Chen and read to blind Mr. Thompson from a water-damaged paperback, now trembled so badly she could not hold it still. Her throat tightened where Douglas's fingers had left their marks. The bruises pulsed. Her ribs remembered the impact of the wall. She ducked into the grocery store and moved to the window. The truck circled the block. Once. Twice. On the 3rd time around, Douglas looked directly at her through the glass, and he smiled. Not a kind smile. A smile that said, "I am here. I am watching. You cannot hide." She bought a single can of soup for $1.89. Cream of mushroom. She counted out $2 bills, and the cashier, a boy who could not have been older than 19, did not make eye contact. Everyone knew. Everyone could see it. The way she moved. The way she checked the window before she walked out. The way her entire body had learned to apologize for existing. The truck was gone by the time she left the store. That was almost worse. The not knowing where it was. The knowledge that it would return. She did not eat the soup. She saved it. At 4 p.m., she clocked back in for the evening shift. Midnight was 7 hours away. 7 hours of fluorescent lights and the smell of industrial soap and the weight of people who did not want to be alive anymore but had no choice. She helped Mr. Thompson, who had been blind for 5 years, to the common room. He liked to sit by the window even though he could not see the window. He liked to feel the warmth on his face. Aria read to him from a novel with water-stained pages, and his head tilted back, and his weathered face became peaceful. At 7:13 p.m., she opened her locker. Inside, on the top shelf, was a pair of small red shoes with white laces. Size 2. They had belonged to a child who lived in the shelter when Aria was 19, a girl named Sophie who slept beside her on a cot and died from influenza in January. Sophie's shoes had been left behind. Aria had kept them. She did not know why she kept them, except that they were the last beautiful thing she had touched that did not need her, that asked nothing of her. She held the shoes for 14 seconds, and then she put them back and closed the locker door. 3 miles away, in a penthouse that rose above downtown Los Angeles like a monument to power and shadow, Aleandro Caruso stood in his daughter Emma's bedroom and watched her sleep. She was 4 years old and burning. The fever had climbed to 103.2 degrees despite the medicine, and her small body shook beneath the quilted blanket as though she was cold even though she was on fire from the inside. His hands, the hands that had broken men, hung helpless at his sides. He had installed the first hidden camera 3 days ago when Emma first complained of a sore throat. Now there were 14 cameras throughout the apartment, each one broadcasting to a bank of monitors in his office downstairs. He could watch her from anywhere. He could see every breath. He could see nothing that would save her. The doctor was coming at midnight. The best doctor in the city. The doctor who had treated senators and judges and other men like Aleandro Caruso who had enough money to buy time, even when time was running out. But time could not be bought. Time could only be waited for, and Aleandro had never been a patient man. Emma stirred in her sleep. She was half delirious, caught between fever dreams and the waking world. She reached out, searching for something to cool her burning skin. The window was open a crack. She could feel the October air on her face, and it felt like mercy. Aria Voss locked the care home at 12:15 a.m. The last patient was settled. The night shift nurse was clocked in. She walked to her car, a 2009 Honda Civic with a check engine light that had been on for 8 months, and sat in the driver's seat without starting the engine. She did not have the strength to drive yet. She sat in the dark and listened to the October wind pushing through the parking lot, and she felt the $78 in her pocket like a stone, like a weight, like proof that she would never escape. She did not know that at that exact moment, in a building 3 miles away, a child was waking from a fever dream, half delirious and searching for something that would cool her burning skin. She did not know that this child would be the hinge upon which her entire life would turn. She did not know that in 14 hours, she would be standing in the cold rain holding a 4-year-old girl whose fever had broken, and that moment would divide everything into before and after. Everything she had survived, every cruelty, every $78 carefully counted on a mattress on the floor, it would all lead to that moment. But the storm was building. The wind was rising. And somewhere in the dark October night, the rain was about to fall. The rain fell harder against the windows of Sunset Valley Care Home as the morning shift ended. Aria locked the medication cabinet with trembling hands, her left eye still swollen purple from where Douglas's fist had connected 2 nights ago. The bruises on her throat had deepened to the color of plums, and every time she swallowed it felt like glass moving down her esophagus. She changed out of her scrubs in the employee bathroom, avoiding the mirror. Some things were easier not to see. Her supervisor Monica appeared in the doorway, holding a folder. The expression on her face said everything before she opened her mouth. "Aria, we need to talk," Monica said quietly. Evelyn Blackwell called this morning. She's on our board of directors, and she's raised some concerns about your associations. My associations? Aria's voice came out barely above a whisper. She says you've been seen with dangerous people. Men in dark suits. She's questioning whether you're a safe presence around our residence. She's requesting your immediate termination pending a background investigation. Monica couldn't meet her eyes. I'm sorry. I know you. But Evelyn writes the checks that keep this place running. Aria stood frozen in her work clothes, the words landing like punches. 3 years. 3 years of double shifts, of eating the leftovers residents didn't finish, of saving every single dollar for her grandmother's medication. 3 years building something solid, and it was evaporating in the time it took to make a phone call. When? Aria asked. Effective immediately. You can appeal, but it'll take weeks. I'm sorry. Aria walked out to the parking lot where Sergio was waiting by the black SUV, exactly where Aleandro had instructed him to wait. When she got in the passenger seat without speaking, he immediately called his boss. The silence on the phone line was so complete it seemed to swallow all the air in the vehicle. Sergio hung up. Boss says you're staying at the penthouse tonight. I can't. I have to work. I need that paycheck. You're not going anywhere, Sergio said, pulling into traffic. Boss's orders. Back at the penthouse, Emma was sleeping in her hospital bed, monitors beeping their steady rhythm. Aleandro stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Los Angeles, his phone pressed to his ear. When he saw Aria, he ended the call and turned. His expression was perfectly calm, which somehow made it more terrifying. Tell me what happened, he said. She told him. Every word. When she finished, she felt something break inside her chest, and the tears came, not quiet tears, but the kind that wreck your body, that come from a place so deep you didn't know it existed. Aleandro crossed the room and did something his men had never seen before. He pulled her against his chest and let her cry into the expensive fabric of his shirt. Franco, stationed by the door, looked away, pretending not to notice. In 15 years of working for Aleandro Caruso, Franco had never witnessed his boss comfort anyone. When her tears finally subsided, Aleandro guided her to the couch. Evelyn Blackwell, he said, and the way he spoke the name made it sound like a curse. Tell me everything you know about her. She's on the hospital board. Real estate developer. Very wealthy. She used to be engaged to Douglas, but she broke it off. Aria's voice was hoarse. But I don't understand why she cares about me. I'm nobody. You're not nobody, Aleandro said, his voice low and dangerous. You're someone my daughter cared enough about to wander out into an October storm to find. That makes you somebody to me. And Evelyn Blackwell just declared war by trying to erase you. He stood and walked to his office. Franco followed. Through the glass walls, Aria could see Aleandro moving with the kind of focused intensity that suggested plans were being made, decisions finalized. She heard only fragments, full investigation on Blackwell's development projects, property records going back 5 years. I want every connection she has to Douglas Hale documented. Emma woke an hour later, calling for her father. Aria helped her sit up, propping pillows behind her small shoulders. The child's heart condition made even simple movements exhausting. Emma's lips took on a faint purple tint from the exertion. Tell me a story, Emma said, reaching for Aria's hand. Aria told her about a brave mouse who lived in a castle and protected everyone else even though she was the smallest. It was a story she'd heard from her own grandmother 50 years ago, passed down through hands that loved her. As she spoke, she felt something shift inside her chest. This child's presence was like a light. Aria had survived so much darkness, her father's drinking, her mother's absence, the shelter with its fluorescent lights and the screams of people losing everything, but this small girl's trust felt like redemption. When Emma fell asleep again, Aleandro appeared and sat on the edge of the bed. He watched his daughter for a long moment, then spoke without looking at Aria. My father beat my mother in front of me, he said quietly. I was 7 years old. I tried to stop him and he broke my arm. When it healed wrong, the doctor said it would affect my strength forever. My father said that meant I was useless. He finally turned to Aria. I spent the next 10 years proving him wrong. I also spent the next 30 years swearing that if I ever had children, I would protect them with everything I have. Emma's heart is broken by biology. But nothing else will ever break her. Not while I breathe. He reached over and adjusted the fall line with surprising gentleness, his scarred fingers moving with practiced care. Why are you telling me this? Aria asked. Because you held my daughter in the cold without knowing who she was. You risked yourself for a stranger. That's the kind of person worth protecting. He looked at her directly. Evelyn Blackwell made a calculation that you were disposable. She was wrong. And she's going to learn exactly how wrong. That night, unable to sleep, Aria found herself on the penthouse balcony. The city stretched out below, millions of lights representing millions of lives. Somewhere in those lights, Douglas was still breathing. Still scheming. Still connected to Evelyn Blackwell by threads of corruption that seemed to run through the entire city like poison through veins. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of rain that hadn't yet fallen. Aria had $78 in her pocket and a future that had just collapsed. But for the first time in months, she wasn't alone. And somehow, standing on the edge of Aleandro's world, she felt something dangerous awakening inside herself. Not fear. Not despair. Fury. In an office 3 miles away, Douglas Hale received a phone call from Evelyn Blackwell. Her voice was sharp, controlled, the voice of someone accustomed to being obeyed. The problem has been solved, she said. She's been terminated. She won't survive this. I'm already spreading rumors about her in the hospital board circles. By next week, she'll be completely isolated. Douglas laughed, but there was an edge to it. Good. Now she'll have nowhere to run but back to me. What neither of them understood was that Aleandro Caruso had already begun moving. Phone calls were being made. Investigators were being hired. Documents were being gathered. And somewhere in the darkness, 12 men in expensive suits were receiving instructions that would reshape the entire foundation of what Evelyn Blackwell had built. The storm was about to break, and when it did, nobody would see it coming. 1 week after Evelyn Blackwell's lies began spreading through the hospital board circles like poison, Aria Voss stood in the produce section of the grocery store on 7th and Main, holding a single apple in her trembling hand. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a pale, sickly glow. She had insisted on going out. Sitting in Aleandro's penthouse felt like living in a cage made of glass and marble, beautiful and suffocating in equal measure. Sergio and Franco waited in the black SUV outside, their watchful eyes turned toward the storefront. She had asked them to stay in the car, to give her this small illusion of normalcy, of being a person who could buy groceries without an army of men in suits monitoring her every breath. The apple cost 79 cents. She had $78 to her name, and for a moment she actually considered putting it back. This was her life now. Counting pennies while Evelyn Blackwell counted millions. Then she saw him. Douglas Hale stood at the far end of the aisle, near the canned vegetables, wearing a grey construction company jacket and a smile that made her stomach turn to ice. His sandy hair was slicked back from his forehead. His eyes, pale blue, empty of anything resembling human kindness, locked onto hers. He began walking toward her, slow and deliberate, like a predator who had finally cornered his prey and saw no reason to rush. Aria's first instinct was to run. Her legs refused. Fear had calcified them into stillness. Well, well, Douglas said, his voice soft, almost gentle, which made it infinitely worse. Running into you here is convenient. He reached out and grabbed her upper arm, his fingers digging in with practiced precision, the grip of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. Come on. We need to talk. She tried to pull away. His grip tightened. He steered her toward the stockroom in the back, past startled employees who suddenly became very interested in their inventory lists. No one made eye contact. No one intervened. The stockroom door swung shut behind them with a heavy click, the sound of the seal cutting off the rest of the world. Concrete floor. Metal shelving unit stacked with cases of soup, beans, pasta sauce. The air smelled like cardboard and fluorescent light. Douglas slammed her against the shelving unit hard enough to knock the wind from her lungs. Cans crashed to the floor, a cacophony of metal striking concrete. "You think you can just replace me?" His voice remained quiet, controlled, which was somehow worse than if he had screamed. "Shack up with some criminal, some mafia boss, and I'll just disappear. Is that what you think?" He grabbed her chin, forcing her face upward to meet his. "I own you, Aria. You understand that? I own you. You're nothing without me. Nothing." His hand went to his jacket pocket. He pulled out his phone, his thumbs moving across the screen. Then he thrust it toward her face. Photos filled the display. Her apartment. Her bedroom window from the outside, the angle precise, calculated. A photo of her sleeping, taken from outside the glass. A photo of her in the shower, the bathroom window offering a perfect vantage point. Her grandmother's house. The blue awning. The address clearly visible on the mailbox. 2247 Oak Street, Cincinnati, Ohio, Douglas said, his voice dripping with honeyed malice. "One phone call, Aria. One phone call and your grandmother has a very unfortunate accident. Maybe she falls down the stairs. Maybe she forgets to take her medication and her heart just stops. These things happen to old people all the time. Nobody investigates. Nobody cares." The blood drained from her face. Her hands came up instinctively, nails clawing at his face. She felt skin tear, felt blood warm beneath her fingernails. He backhanded her with his free hand, his knuckles connecting with her cheekbone, then her lip. She tasted copper. Felt her lips split open. The taste of blood filled her mouth. The stockroom door exploded inward. Sergio and Franco moved like violent given human form. They had heard the crash of falling cans from the sales floor. They had been waiting, always waiting, for something like this. Sergio grabbed Douglas by the front of his jacket and hurled him backward into the shelving unit. Cans rained down like hail. "Whoa, whoa," Douglas held up his hands, his voice shifting instantly to something falsely reasonable. "Just talking to my girl here. No law against having a conversation with your own girlfriend, right? Just a little misunderstanding." He straightened his jacket, his smirk returning as he backed toward the door. "See you soon, baby." He walked out into the afternoon light as if he had done nothing at all. Franco helped Aria to her feet. Her lip throbbed. Her arm ached where his fingers had gripped. She couldn't stop shaking. Sergio was already on his phone, speaking quietly to Aleandro. His expression remained blank, but his jaw was tight enough to crack teeth. Neither man said anything to her about what had happened, but she could feel the weight of it pressing down. She was no longer just a woman they were protecting. She was a liability. A problem that Douglas Hale kept creating. That same afternoon, at exactly 3:44 p.m., Evelyn Blackwell arrived at Sunset Valley Care Home with a photographer and a man in a pressed suit carrying a leather portfolio. She wore white linen, expensive and crisp, and her smile was a blade wrapped in ice. Monica Chen, the director, stood at the front desk looking pale. Evelyn had called ahead to request a media opportunity regarding her foundation's new standards initiative. She had made it sound perfectly reasonable. A philanthropist interested in promoting excellence in elder care. Who could refuse? The photographer snapped photos while Evelyn walked through the hallways, nodding approvingly at the residents, touching the furniture with the air of someone inspecting property. The man in the suit took notes. Then they gathered in the lobby, and Evelyn's voice grew louder, more performative. "We must ensure that those who care for our most vulnerable citizens maintain the highest moral standards," she said, her words carefully pitched so that residents and staff could all hear. "Integrity in elder care is not negotiable. Which is why I'm deeply concerned about recent developments regarding one of your employees. Monica's face went the color of old paper. Aria Voss, Evelyn continued, turning to face the photographer directly, has cultivated a relationship with a known organized crime figure. Someone with extensive connections to illegal activities. I have to ask, Mrs. Chen, do you feel confident that someone with these kinds of moral compromises should be trusted alone with your residence? The photographer's camera clicked and clicked and clicked. This isn't appropriate, Monica began. Isn't it? Evelyn's smile widened. We're simply discussing qualifications. I'm sure you'll want to handle this situation with the appropriate level of seriousness. By 6 p.m. that evening, Aria had received a formal termination letter. By 8 p.m., the article was live on 3 local news websites. The headline read, "Care Home Workers' Criminal Connections Raise Safety Concerns." There was a photo of Aria, pulled from the facility's website, placed directly beside a grainy photograph of Aleandro that made him look like a villain from a crime drama. The article quoted anonymous sources expressing concerns. The word criminal appeared 14 times in under 600 words. Aria's reputation, built through 3 years of 12-hour shifts and genuine compassion for people who had no one else, evaporated in the space of an afternoon. That night, as October wind tore through the city like a blade wrapped in ice, Aria stood on the penthouse balcony on the 23rd floor. The city lights stretched out below her, each one representing a life, a home, a future that belonged to someone other than her. Dead leaves skittered across the concrete like tiny bones. Her breath came out in white clouds that dissolved into nothing. Everything was gone. Her job. Her reputation. The fragile illusion that she might somehow build something that could protect her grandmother. Douglas still knew where her grandmother lived. Douglas still had photographs. Douglas still had the kind of patience that came from men who believed they owned other people, and Evelyn Blackwell still had the kind of money and connections that could destroy a life before breakfast. She walked to the railing. The metal was cold beneath her palms, so cold it burned. The drop was clean. The fall would be quick. The city lights blurred through her tears into abstract patterns of gold and red and white. One step. That was all it would require. One small decision and the pain would stop. Her grandmother would grieve, but she would understand that Aria had been drowning for so long that surfacing had become impossible. She gripped the railing tighter. Closed her eyes. Then, from inside the penthouse, a small voice, sleepy and uncertain, "Aria? Will you read me the mouse story again?" "Emma." Aria's eyes snapped open. She turned from the railing and walked back inside. The child stood in the doorway wearing a pink nightgown, her dark curls messy from sleep, her four-pole wheeled carefully beside her small frame. She clutched a worn copy of a picture book about a small mouse who lived in the walls of a grand house. "Of course I will," Aria said, and her voice didn't break. "Not yet." She took Emma's small hand and led her back to bed. She began to read about the brave mouse who was small but never gave up, and with every page turned, something inside her realigned. Not healed. Not fixed. But anchored. One tiny voice. One small reason. It wasn't enough to make the pain stop, but it was enough to make her step back from the edge. While Aria read bedtime stories, Aleandro sat in his office on the opposite side of the city, surrounded by files that Franco had compiled over the previous 72 hours. Each document told a story. Douglas Hale's bank accounts. His communications. The money transfers from shell companies registered to Evelyn Blackwell. Photographs of construction sites where undocumented workers lived in fear, their documents confiscated, their wages stolen. Tax fraud. Bribery of city inspectors. Federal housing grants diverted into private accounts. And embedded in the financial records, payments to 3 lapped officers, corrupt men who had already rejected Aria's restraining order twice, men who would make sure that no police report she filed would ever reach a prosecutor's desk. Aleandro picked up his phone and dialed a number he had not used in 3 years. Special Agent Sarah Morrison, FBI. They had worked together once, a matter involving weapons trafficking that had taken down an organization of 16 men. She owed him. More importantly, she was the kind of agent who actually cared about justice rather than career advancement. "Morrison," she answered on the second ring. "I have something for you," Aleandro said. "Federal crimes. Human trafficking. Bribery. Conspiracy. Detailed evidence. Everything you need." There was a pause. Then, "Who?" "Douglas Hale. Evelyn Blackwell. And 3 lapped officers operating as their protection." Another pause. Longer this time. "Can you get me everything by tomorrow?" "It's already compiled. Waiting for you." The line went dead. At 5:13 a.m. 3 days later, dawn still a theoretical concept, 12 FBI agents in tactical gear executed simultaneous raids across Los Angeles. The operation had been planned with meticulous precision. Surprise. Speed. Overwhelming force. Douglas Hale's house, a modest ranch in Van Nuys, the kind of place where no one would suspect a predator lived. The door came off its hinges at 5:48 a.m. Douglas was in bed, still tangled in sheets and the assumption of his own invulnerability. He scrambled backward, shouting incoherent protests, his hands raised in panic. Agent Morrison entered first, badge already displayed, reading his rights in a voice stripped of all emotion. The phone was in his nightstand drawer. The photos were still there. The restraining order violations. The texts coordinating with his dirty cop contacts. And buried in his laptop, recovered from beneath his mattress where he had hidden it, the financial records showing payments from Evelyn Blackwell's companies, the photographs of terrified workers, the evidence of a systematic operation designed to break people. Douglas collapsed against the wall, his legs suddenly unable to support him. He was trembling like a cornered animal, his predatory confidence evaporating in the face of consequences he had never actually believed would come. His voice cracked as he sobbed, the sound of a man watching his world transform into something unrecognizable. "I was just following orders," he gasped. "Evelyn made me do it. I can give you names." "Names?" "Please, I can." Agent Morrison said nothing. The handcuffs clicked shut. Evelyn Blackwell's mansion on Mulholland Drive was a different kind of operation. Agents arrived to find her in the marble foyer dressed in a cream-colored silk robe, holding a champagne glass from the previous evening's charity benefit. Her face went white the moment she saw the badges. "Do you have a warrant?" Her lawyer, a man named Reynolds who had never lost a case, was already pulling out his phone. "We have 7 warrants," Agent Morrison said. She handed them over. Federal charges: conspiracy to commit human trafficking, bribery of public officials, wire fraud, tax evasion, racketeering. Evelyn's face twisted. "Do you know who I am?" "I have the mayor on speed dial. I have the city council in my pocket." "You can't possibly." "The mayor was arrested at his home 40 minutes ago," Agent Morrison said. "The city council members are being processed downtown. You're not special, Ms. Blackwell. You're just another criminal who believed she was too connected to face consequences." The arrest was public. Media had been tipped off. Cameras waited outside the mansion. Evelyn's face filled every news channel as she was led away in handcuffs, her robe and silk nightgown offering no dignity, no protection. Her scream of outrage as photographers swarmed around her was the sound of someone watching empire collapse into nothing. The federal courthouse, 6 months later. The afternoon light came through the tall windows in geometric patterns that cut across the judge's bench and the defendant's table. Douglas Hale stood as the verdict was read. 40 years. Stalking. Assault. Witness intimidation. Conspiracy to commit human trafficking. His face crumpled like paper. He had thought his money and connections would protect him. He had thought there were rules for men like him, different rules that didn't apply. There were not. Evelyn Blackwell stood rigid as the sentence came down. 35 years. Her assets, 12 properties, for companies, $18 million in accounts and investments seized by the federal government. She stood frozen, unable to comprehend the mathematics of a universe where money could not purchase escape. Aleandro watched from the gallery, his expression unreadable. Beside him, Aria held Emma's small hand. The child whispered, her voice barely carrying, "Are the bad people gone now, Papa?" Aleandro's jaw tightened at the word. Papa. Not yet. But soon. That was a conversation for another day. Yes, he said quietly. They're gone. The Italian restaurant smelled like rosemary and burning candles, like possibility wrapped in candlelight. Aleandro Caruso sat across from Aria Voss at a table meant for two, the rest of the dining room empty, the doors locked, the world held at a distance. 6 months had passed since the night he found her bleeding on the highway. 6 months of watching her rebuild herself brick by brick while his empire crumbled into legitimacy. He wore a charcoal suit with the top button undone, silver catching the light at his wrist. His scar caught shadows. But his eyes were different now, softer, the way Franco had noticed last week and still couldn't explain to Sergio without sounding like a fool in love himself. Aria wore a green dress, simple, something she had chosen and paid for with her own money. Her hair fell past her shoulders. The bruises were gone. What remained was stronger. "You've rebuilt your life," Aleandro said, his voice deep and solid like an oath made in a cathedral. "New job. New apartment. Independence. You don't need my protection anymore." Aria set her wine glass down carefully. "Is that what this dinner is? You saying goodbye?" "No." He leaned forward. "It's me asking if you'd want something different. Not protection. Not obligation. Something equal." She studied him across the candlelight. Aleandro Caruso asking, not commanding. "You taught me that." His hands were on the table, visible, unthreatening. "The night I found you on the highway, I saw someone who reminded me of myself. Desperate. Hurt. Fighting alone. But these 6 months, I've watched you become someone who reminds me of who I wanted to be. Someone who chooses kindness when cruelty would be easier. You dismantled 2 people's entire lives for me. I dismantled 2 people who built their lives on cruelty." His jaw tightened. "There's a difference. Douglas and Evelyn hurt vulnerable people because they could. I stopped them because someone should have stopped my father when I was 7 years old and his fist was the only language he spoke." The restaurant fell silent except for the hum of the kitchen far away, the distant sound of a plate being set down, a chef's voice calling orders in rapid Italian. Aria reached across the table and took his hand. Her fingers were warm. "I spent 6 months thinking I was weak. That I needed saving. But you never treated me like I was broken. Even that first night, you asked if I could stand. You gave me the choice. Because you were never weak." He turned her hand over, traced the calluses earned from double shifts and fighting for survival. Weak people don't work 18 hours a day for $78 and still stop to save a stranger's child. She wasn't a stranger. She was a little girl who needed help. Exactly. He released her hand reluctantly. "That's who you are. That's why." He stopped. Started again, the words coming harder now. "In 15 years, Franco and Sergio never saw me let anyone near Emma. I built walls so high nothing could get through. Then you climbed over them without even trying." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want you in my life. In Emma's life. Not as someone I protect but as someone I stand beside. If you want that." Aria's eyes glistened. She didn't blink. "I want that. But I need you to understand, I won't be kept. I won't be owned. I choose this freely or not at all. I wouldn't have it any other way." They sat in the candlelight like 2 people who had clawed their way out of violence and found something softer on the other side. His hand found hers again and neither let go. 1 year later, the penthouse had transformed into something that resembled a home. Emma's hospital bed was gone, replaced by a regular bed with a canopy decorated with painted stars. Family photographs covered the walls, Emma's first day of kindergarten, her smile wide and unafraid. Aria and Aleandro at the beach with sand in their hair and the sky turning gold behind them. All three of them at Emma's birthday party, Emma's face covered in cake, everyone laughing like people who had forgotten how. On a shelf near the window sat red child's shoes, the ones Aria had kept since the shelter, since the night she first became real to someone. Beside them sat Emma's first shoes after surgery, tiny and white and perfect. The progression of survival to healing to joy, visible, tangible, real. Aria worked at the care facility she loved, the one where she was now shift supervisor, where she advocated for patients with a voice that carried weight and respect. She came home each evening to a family she had chosen. The apartment in her name was just a memory now. This was home. Here. With them. Aleandro still had cameras throughout the penthouse, but he watched them less, trusted more. Emma was healthy, thriving, her laugh filling the rooms like light. She called Aria Mama without hesitation, and Aleandro never corrected her, just held both of them close like they were the most dangerous treasure he'd ever possessed. Emma asked one afternoon while Aria braided her hair in the living room, Aleandro pretending to read a newspaper but actually watching them reflected in the window, "When you found me on the street that night, were you scared?" Aria finished the braid and tied it with a ribbon Emma had chosen. "Terrified. But you helped me anyway. Sometimes the right thing to do is scary, sweetheart." Emma considered this with the seriousness of a 5-year-old. "Papa says you're the bravest person he knows." Aria looked across the room at Aleandro. He was watching them with an expression so soft that Franco still couldn't believe it when he saw it. The man who had once made grown criminals weep was melting like candle wax under the weight of a child's love and a woman's choice. "Your papa taught me something important," Aria said, pulling Emma close. "Brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you move forward anyway." Emma hugged her and Aleandro rose from his chair, crossed the room, and wrapped both of them in his arms. The three of them together like that, a family built from broken pieces that fit perfectly. A family that had no business existing but existed anyway, breathing, laughing, alive. I thought strength meant never needing help. I thought survival meant staying small and quiet and hoping the storm would pass without notice. But real strength is knowing when to accept the hand reaching toward you. Real survival is rebuilding yourself brick by brick until you stand as tall as the person you were always meant to be. Douglas Hale sits in a federal prison 40 miles north, staring at 40 years stretching ahead like a sentence with no pardon. Evelyn Blackwell lost everything, the properties, the companies, the $18 million, her social standing reduced to a name in a courthouse record. My grandmother got the medication she needed. Emma got her surgery and her health and her life back. And I got something I never thought I deserved, a future that doesn't taste like fear. The cameras that were meant to protect one child ended up saving another kind of life entirely. Sometimes the most dangerous man in the city is exactly who you need when the world has been cruel too long. But more than that, sometimes you save yourself and someone just holds the door open. If you're in that storm right now, counting your remaining dollars and wondering if you'll make it to the next week, hear this: the storm will pass and you are far stronger than you think. If this story moved you, drop a like right now. Subscribe because tomorrow's story will change how you see the world. Share this with someone who needs to know they're not alone. Comment below and tell me, what would you do if you found a stranger's child in danger? Your engagement keeps these stories alive. Don't just watch, be part of this community. Hit that notification bell and I'll see you tomorrow with another story that proves love is the most dangerous weapon of all. We wish all of you watching good health, a joyful life, and days filled with peace and happiness. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. We'll see you again in the next video.